Hi, this is Jack Stanley, and I wanted to talk about some of the other things that have taken place in history that are really kind of frightening. And I would like to talk about the worst Holocaust in the history of man, and that was to the Native American in the United States, a Holocaust that went on for 250 years. It is damn frightening what was done to the American Indian and how many millions were killed. In the name of what? A bunch of selfish, greedy landowners, to be perfectly honest. And a bunch of people who thought it was God's idea to have manifest destiny, which is absolute nonsense. God isn't in favor of anybody because God is God. What can I say? I can't say anything more than that because there's not much more to say than that. So, manifest destiny, which led to so many of the American Indian being killed, being relocated, being lied to, being dealt with blankets that were filled with smallpox, in every way possible to destroy them, it was done. We should hang our heads in shame for what was done to the American Indian. It was cruel. Look at the Trail of Tears, that massive march in which we marched them till they died en route. It makes the Bataan Death March look like a chicken hunt. This was far worse. And do we always criticize the Japanese for the Bataan Death March? How often do we criticize ourselves for the terrible treatment of the American Indian? I don't hear it much at all. We should be ashamed of what we did to those people. We should be embarrassed, going all the way from the dawn of this country, all the way from George Washington up. They did their best to treat the American Indian, who rightfully was here first, as a second-class citizen that really had no right in being here. In fact, I'm not quite sure at that time in the beginnings of this country whether slaves or Native Americans had a higher status. I guess that whole thing with the American Indian is this. The philosophy was basically in the United States government that the only good Indian was a dead Indian. And we treated them as such. We have no right to knock what Hitler did. We have no right to knock what Japan did to China. We have no right to knock what Japan did to the Philippines. We should just basically take a look at our own backyard and see what we did. Yet, where do you see this in our history? Where do we talk about it? I have gone to several Holocaust museums. I haven't seen anything about the American Indian. There should be. There should be monuments to the horrors that were inflicted on men, women, and children by the United States government and led to the deaths of millions of American Indians. But they are invisible in our eyes. They are invisible because we really don't give a damn. And that's very true. In American history, we don't give a damn except for just a few instances. If your name is Abraham Lincoln, and even though you were somewhat of a bigot, even though you were somewhat of a liar, although you're somewhat of a shifty politician, all of a sudden you're sacred. Well, he killed a lot of American Indians too by orders because they revolted. They should have revolted. I think the Battle of Little Bighorn is one of the best things that ever happened. And I also believe that the United States owes the American Indian an awful lot. I hear people complaining that the American Indians are getting licenses to have casinos, as well they should. If I see an oppressed people, and believe me, there have been lots of oppressed people, and listen to them whine. We see it in all the other Holocausts. We hear lots of things about it. But what have we done about the most horrid of the Holocausts? The treatment of the American Indian. It's embarrassing. It's shameful. Only matched by what we did to the Mexicans. We invaded Mexico. They fired at us, and we said we claim the land in which we're standing. Therefore, they are shooting at us on our land. What a line of bullshit that was. That was purely an invasion pushed by James K. Polk, who is a vicious, nasty individual, who was a self-righteous religious bigot, who actually sold and bought slaves while in the White House. He was the big proponent of manifest destiny, and he did not want to hear from a really cranky old man named John Quincy Adams, who said that slavery was immoral. He tried to have John Quincy Adams kicked out of the House of Representatives for saying such a thing. Well, James K. Polk is a dark spot in our history. And the Mexican-American War, which is just shameful, to put it nicely, basically we invaded Mexico and took half of Mexico. Shame on us. We sit there and hold our heads up high, like we are some great country who did great things for people. But let's take a look at some of the skeletons in our closet. If I can speak biblically like Abraham Lincoln loved to do for the common man because it made it think like he cared, let's not judge that we be judged. And by golly, don't we judge? My goodness, aren't we the first people to sit there and complain about what other people are doing or basically hurting another group of people? Shame on us. It is embarrassing. And I'm just touching the surface because there's an awful lot of our history that is dreadful. Yes, every country has its skeletons. In many cases, we weren't much better than Hitler. And that's a really sad thing to have to say about a people. But if you are American Indian, and you look at the world today, and you look at your history, you can realize that the American Indian were treated like the Jews in Nazi Germany. So were we any better than Hitler? I don't know. It's a little embarrassing. But by God, aren't we self-righteous? By God, don't we stand by our Bibles? By God, we did it all in the name of God, which is another horrid thing that happened to this country. So, what can I say? The American Indian, the Mexican War, and a vast majority of our history is frighteningly incorrect. And we have pushed it all under the carpet. And we have made all of these people look like they're wonderful. George Washington on, that they're without sin. As I mentioned in the previous video I made, it's like you have a picture of Abraham Lincoln and you got a big sign in front saying, do not touch. You can't change their history because it's already been decided. Well, until people can think, until people can reason, because we are getting dumber by the minute, by the way, in this country, this is something that eventually should be rectified because we need to talk more about our real history and not talk about the pompous nonsense that has been made up by countless and, what can I say, lying historians.